Hi everyone, Briana Whitney here. I don't usually start a podcast with an intro like this, but this is a special re-release of our most popular episode, the Robert Fisher case, because we've now hit the 20-year anniversary of the horrible crime and house fire and the last time Robert Fisher was ever seen before he assumably killed his whole family in April of 2001. This case has captivated not only Arizonans, but the world for 2 decades as tips still pour in and people debate whether Robert Fisher is dead or alive. Because of the anniversary, I reached out to the lead detective, and he confirmed there are tips they're investigating that came in since we sat down for our interview. It's eerie to hit an anniversary like this and still have so many questions. This episode explores all the details and theories in the case from those close to the investigation. And next week, we'll be releasing a new Q&A episode about the case, where my producer Sergio and I discuss the new information and share our thoughts on what we found most shocking and bizarre, and if we think Robert Fisher is dead or alive.
Yes, hi, there's a fire.
The house is on fire?
Yes, and hurry, yes,
Okay,
please.
all right, 1 minute, please.
I think this was his message saying that, come find me or you won't find me.
Is this around 74th and Oak reference to fire?
Yes, it is. There are people in there, and this whole house exploded.
Were there people inside the house?
Yes, there are. They're probably dead.
I hope he's dead. I hope he is.
You're listening to True Crime Arizona, the podcast.
Brittany's 1 year old.
Grandpa,
Hello, honey.
where did Robert go?
These home videos tell the story of a loving father and a happy life.
Hey, check this out.
Girl Scouts, Sundays at church, date nights. The Fisher family of 4 was your typical Scottsdale suburban family.
You're trying to show off, Ruger. Up, Ruger. Up. Ruger's a tree climbing dog.
Mary and I were the little Brownie Girl Scout leaders for the troop for the school, and Mary was the cookie mom. And so our girls were great friends, saw each other every day, and Mary and I became friends.
Lori Greenbeck and her husband often spent their days with husband and wife, Robert and Mary Fisher.
How often did you see her and Robert together?
Pretty much a couple times a week, maybe. I mean, he might come by the office to pick her up for lunch, or I'd be at their house, they'd be at our house. We did things with them as couples, my husband and I. We went to Diamondback games. My husband went camping with him and quad riding. Robert was, quite the outdoorsman. So, we just did stuff like people do,
Normal couples do.
Right, you're friends.
She became so close with Mary that Mary came to work for her as their office manager. Lori's daughter was best friends with Brittany Fisher, who was 12 at the time, older sister to 10-year-old Bobby.
Don't be acting cocky, Brittany.
The Fishers had it all.
Good job.
Until the overnight hours of that April night in 2001, when everything everyone thought went up in flames.
When was the last time you saw or talked to Mary?
The day before. She left. She left the office, and she would have been back that next morning.
Thomas Duran.
You go by TJ?
Yep,
How long were you with Scottsdale PD for?
18 years.
I mean, you'd still be with them if it wasn't for an injury.
His home is now full of larger-than-life bookshelves, lined with books about true crime and famous criminal cases. He enjoys a cigar on the rooftop patio, overlooking the city he served for years. TJ Duran is a retired Scottsdale police officer, and no matter how many years go by, that day is etched in his mind.
Okay, what's going on there?
It's a big fire. It's a really big fire behind. It just blew up.
Okay, what's on fire?
The whole house.
The whole
The
house?
whole house is
Take us back to April 9th, April 10th, 2001. Were you there on the scene?
Yes.
Give us the timeline from your perspective when you got the call, when you got out there, and what happened that day.
We got the call for a house fire. I got there, and Sergeant Don Bellendier, John Kirkham, other detectives, Joe LeDuc, they were all there. We were there. And once the fire was ceased by the fire department, John and I walked around to the back. And a couple of the walls were blown out because of the gas exploding. We were looking into the rooms, and you could see the beds, and you could see the kids' bodies, and we knew there was a body in the master bedroom. We didn't know who, and John and I immediately kind of looked at each other and were like, I think we have a homicide here.
Families who lived in the cul-de-sac sat watching in horror as the Fisher family home exploded into flames, burning to the ground. But TJ had a reason to believe this wasn't just a house fire.
A house fire like that, somebody's going to move. Somebody's going to get out of bed. The mother, one of the kids is going to jump up. They were all in a prone position like they were sleeping. So John and I were like, I got a funny feeling when we look into this, this is a homicide. They were either shot or blunt force trauma or something occurred here.
Of the family of 4, only 3 dead bodies inside. Brittany and Bobby in their beds, and once the fire was put out, investigators found Mary was the one in the master bedroom. So where was Robert Fisher?
I went to where he was working at the time.
Mayo Clinic.
At the Mayo Clinic on 56th Street.
He wasn't there. Nobody knew where he was.
I love putting the pieces together, putting the puzzle together.
At that point, 2 investigations began, finding Robert and piecing together what happened inside the Fisher home. John Heinzelman is the current Scottsdale detective on the case. It didn't take long to track down where Robert was around 10 p.m. the night before. A security camera captured him taking out money at the ATM down the street from their home.
He took out $280. That's an odd amount.
It is.
And it's not much.
Right.
What's your insight on that?
My personal thought, the ATM was what I'll call a breadcrumb to us, to somebody, to say that I'm not there, I'm smarter than you, I got away. I think this was his message saying that I'm on the loose and maybe even I did it, but come find me or you won't find me.
That's when investigators started questioning friends. Lori Greenback was one of them.
We weren't back at the office, I bet half an hour, and the detectives were coming in asking about Robert. And I'm thinking too that Robert's probably in there too, they just hadn't found him, you know what I mean? And I'm like, and Robert wasn't at work? Ugh, you don't know what to think. But the way they were asking questions, you knew they had some suspicions. And I'm like, they think Robert did this. And to my husband and I, we're like, there is no way. No way.
But maybe Robert's picture-perfect life wasn't so perfect.
Was he controlling?
He was definitely controlling. Definitely controlling. He wasn't, I didn't not like Robert, but I didn't, he was Mary's husband. He wasn't my husband, so I don't have to like him. But anytime she wanted to do something at the house, she had to have his permission. Anytime the kids wanted to do anything, they had to have his permission. Mary couldn't say, yes, Brittany, you can spend the night at Mallory's house, But my daughter spent the night at their house. This is not a person you would ever, how many people let their kids go to somebody's house and sleep over? You would never have the feeling he was going to kill his whole family.
As investigators collected evidence and pieced together how the house exploded, that's exactly what they believe Robert did.
And it wasn't just a surface level slit.
Yeah, he basically almost decapitated them because they got the fire out so quickly that actually below them on the mattress, it was still stained. He slit their throats while they were sleeping in bed. He slit his wife's throat. And then the FU shot was the bullet in the head. And then he sets up his house by breaking a gas line, lights a candle on a table in a hallway, gives him enough time to drive off because the gas is going to take some time to sink. I can't fathom. Can you fathom somebody that thinks that way? I've said it before, and I truly believe it, that, you know, when you're a child and you don't want to sleep with the light off because you're afraid of the boogeyman, for his kids, he was the boogeyman.
Robert.
Look at this time, Bob. You got one hand in the air. One hand away.
Hours of home videos of the Fishers lie in the evidence vault at Scottsdale PD. Watching them back on a VCR, they look happy, riding bikes, eating cake on their kids' birthdays, celebrating holidays. But digging just a little deeper below the surface revealed a different story.
Their relationship was rocky from everybody that we've spoken with. I know that there was allegations of infidelity.
On both sides?
On both sides, as far as I know.
Definitely there was some differences. There was some dysfunction there. There were theories that Robert Fisher had an affair. There were Fishers that maybe Mary was having an affair. There were, you know, she was looking for a divorce. So there was a lot of stuff going on. The kids were great, you know, from what we gathered from other detectives interviewing, from the school teachers and friends, the kids were great. Friends, Mary's friends, 100% spoke highly.
A spotty marriage was one thing, but the innocence of Brittany and Bobby was another. What would drive him to kill his own children? John found one possible motive.
I know he talked at length about his parents' bitter divorce, and that he had made several comments about that his children were not going to be products of divorce. So in this regard, was he planning somewhat of a mercy, killing at this, to say, well, you won't have to live with divorced parents, or you won't have to split time, or if it gets bitter or ugly, that I'm going to spare you all this.
After the carefully calculated crime and house explosion, Robert Fisher was still nowhere to be found.
We advise anybody who may come into contact with him to just be cautious.
He got a large head start on everybody.
Right, he basically got a 10 or 12 hour head start, because I think the original call for the fire came in about 8 or 8:30.
Yeah.
So the photograph from the ATM, I believe, is about 9:30 or 10. I'd have to look at it to be exact.
Right.
So think about that. He's got a 10 to 12 hour jump on us. So within an hour, he's out of the valley.
Lori starts racking her brain of when the last time she saw Robert was. It was just a few days prior, over the weekend.
My husband and Robert had taken their quads and they'd gone up to Young to go camping. And my husband, this was his first quad. But Robert, he's the outdoorsman. He's always hunting and fishing and camping. And so he was kind of, teaching Herb how to ride the quads. And they rode all over that area. I mean, they were, in and out places. My husband said it was like being out in the woods with Daniel Boone. He said he had no idea where he was. They were riding past dark. And my husband said, and then all of a sudden, we pull up and we're at camp. Robert knew his way around that place in the dark. And my husband was like, it was crazy.
Many described Robert as an outdoorsman who loved taking trips to the woods. So what happened days later fit Robert's narrative.
I still go back to that phone call, because that woman was adamant, because I believe that was Robert Fisher.
Robert's 4Runner was found in the woods near Young, Arizona, about 3 hours away from Scottsdale. Next to his car was his dog Blue, found alive. Robert wasn't there. TJ started investigating tips.
I spoke to a tow truck driver up on the rim. I think it was about 5 days prior to where he believes he pulled him out of the ditch, because he believes that's the same truck that he pulled out because it was a single male and the male had a dog in the front car. Was he up there driving around trying to decide what's he going to do? Who knows? Who knows what he was thinking? You just can't get into that mind. You know, he walked out of there. That's my belief, because when I got back to town, after we were all up there, I got a call from a couple that was actually up there a few days before we found the truck, and they were on the old Young Road, and they were heading, I believe, south off of 260 on that dirt road Young. It's not a very wide road. Two cars can pass each other, but it's going to be tight. She told me that he was on the outside of the road. Well, a male was. And as she passed them, she looked at her husband and said, "That looks like Robert Fisher." So he walked out of there. Possibility.
And that was him walking?
Walking. He was walking north towards Highway 260 on the Young Road.
As detectives launched a search team to comb the area near Robert's car, a wave of anxiety ran through Lori. She knows that location. She and her husband called Scottsdale PD to come back to their office.
They pull out this big map on the desk, and they're going all over this map, and my husband's showing them where they camped, and sure enough, that's where they found the truck.
It was the same area that your husband had been?
Yep, right where they'd been. Yep. So my husband thinks now he was up there scouting it while they were camping. That's what. So now that we know, more about what really happened, he said, yeah, Robert was planning this, and we were scouting the area, his getaway.
You think it was premeditated?
I think so now.
We will be working through the evening. We do have a cadaver dog en route. We're going to be checking the caves.
Caves in the area were searched. Homes in the area were searched. Every law enforcement agency in Northeast Arizona was actively looking for Robert Fisher. TJ believes Robert left the area and never turned back.
Do you believe Robert Fisher is dead or alive?
It's 50-50. I lean that he's still alive. I truly do. I lean that he is still alive.
But John says another theory is completely possible.
The area where the car was found, or the 4Runner was found, is less than a mile from the Apache Indian reservation and territory. If, for example, he decided this is where I'm going to go, and he went on to that land, I know that we didn't follow, and I know most people, if you don't have a permit or if you're not allowed to be there, it's trespassing. And so local hunters don't hunt on that land. It would be a perfect opportunity to not be found.
That theory would be rocked by a tip out of Canada years later that blew everyone's minds.
Are there still tips coming in?
There are still tips coming in. Just as a matter of fact, on my way here, I received another tip. This one from Canada, I believe. Every tip is received. Every tip is at least vetted out.
In 2002, Robert Fisher was added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. Since then, Scottsdale PD has fielded thousands of calls and tips from around the world. John still takes calls weekly.
We've received tips from several, again, Central American countries, from Guatemala and Honduras, several from Mexico, as well as Canada, and some in Europe.
In 2011, authorities would take a Canadian man into custody believed to be Robert Fisher.
There were eerie similarities between Robert Fisher and the man that was taken into custody.
Right, and I'm not 100% on everything because I was not following up on that tip, but what I do know is his appearance was similar to Robert's. He had the missing tooth. He had the back scar from the surgery that Robert Fisher had years prior when he was in the Navy. There were certainly a lot of similarities to that. This was the best lead that we had seen, and to that end that they had apprehended him, and it wasn't until fingerprint identification was made that was determined that it was just not him.
Could you change your fingertips?
You can't change your fingerprints. You can damage them, you can obliterate them, you can do different things to them, but even that creates your own unique fingerprint identifications.
Robert Fisher's longtime next-door neighbor in Scottsdale told me on the phone he is sure that was Robert Fisher. Authorities brought the neighbor up to Canada and pretended to take him into custody as part of the investigation. They put him in the room where others apprehended were being taken to get a look at the man believed to possibly be Robert. That neighbor told me the experience was beyond eerie. He says the Robert Fisher lookalike was brought in, the man scanned the room normally, but stopped when he saw the neighbor. His facial expression changed, and he locked eyes. The neighbor says he knew Robert recognized him, and to this day, that neighbor is 100% certain that was not a lookalike, but it was Robert Fisher. Authorities trust the fingerprints.
You don't think there's any way that that was Robert Fisher?
No, that was not him. It's just 100% not him.
They're still part of the investigation that lingers.
Our search at that time in 2001 didn't encompass that. And so then it's very plausible that he is still out there, or remnants, are still there.
John's goal is simple: get onto the neighboring reservation a mile from where Robert's car was found and search.
So that would be the next step?
But to look at that and to say, well, in order to do it right, bosses, we're going to need probably 15 or 20 people, probably 3 or 4 days. It's in the middle of nowhere. We're going to need logistics. We're going to need all this. And then suddenly, and it's a hunch. When it's said and done, it's not a guarantee that we're going to find anything.
No, but you could cross it off.
But that's my point. Maybe this is the best we have, knowing he did it and never finding him again.
It's daunting.
Definitely. So it hangs over you.
For all anyone knows, Robert Fisher could be sitting in a home right now with a new identity. TJ thinks so.
If you look over and look at Robert Fisher on TV, look over at whether it's a new boyfriend or new husband, no, my George wouldn't do that. That's not George. He's not from Arizona. How do you know? And it'll take that one phone call for somebody to finally say, you know what? There's something about him that has always nagged at the back of my neck. What's frightening about that is, let's say he does make that mistake. And let's say he is with somebody. Now he needs to leave again. What's he going to do? Are those people in danger? If he did it once, why not do it again?
The reality is,
there's enough evidence involved in everything to back up any plausible story.
It's a dark mark left on Scottsdale's history, but even darker for those who called the Fisher family their friends.
It makes you totally question your own judgment. I mean, how could nobody have seen this? How could nobody have had any idea he was capable of that? I mean, you really think, you start going over every little fight you knew they had, every little disagreement, every little thing Mary told me, every little thing, the kids were doing. I'm thinking, gosh, was there anything we could have seen, we could have known, it was so unexpected.
Lori Greenbeck still struggles to wrap her mind around it. She lost her best friend Mary. Her daughter lost her best friend Brittany. And the Robert Fisher she thought she knew all along was seemingly a lie. That's something she may never come to peace with.
Do you think he's still alive?
I have no idea. I can't imagine a human being living with themselves after doing what he did. I hope he's dead. I hope he is. I don't want him to be out there. I don't want knowing what he's capable of. I don't want him to think he can start all over and, have another family. And I don't want him to be living when his family is dead. I know she knew we appreciated her and we loved her and the kids. It's crazy. After all this time, I was still painful.
I'm journalist Briana Whitney. True Crime Arizona, the podcast, is hosted by me and produced by Sergio Hernandez. To hear our latest podcasts and case investigations, subscribe on any of these platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher. If you have any information or tips about the Robert Fisher case or his whereabouts, please call the Scottsdale Police Department or the FBI